Forest rangers work in remote areas, miles of forest, very few people nearby. Most of the job is routine, counting trees, marking trails, preventing illegal hunting. But in some cases, they come across something that should not be there. These are not wild animals or common accidents. They are documented situations where something went completely out of control. In 1987, a forest ranger was working in Yugva National Park in central Russia. The park covered nearly 19,000 square kilometers. More than half of it was boreal forest made up of pine and fir trees. Few tourists visited each year, usually families of Red Army soldiers stationed at nearby bases. One summer day, an army officer approached the ranger on a trail. He was furious. His family had been threatened by a strange man during a picnic. The man was tall, wore dark furs, and had a hat made from a bear's head. He stood at a distance, watching the family. When the officer confronted him, the man suddenly ran toward them as if he were going to attack. The children screamed. The officer's wife cried. But it was a false charge. The man stopped, laughed, and walked away. The officer demanded that the man be found immediately. 2 rangers began searching. They found some tracks, but all of them led into streams or hard ground. There were no signs of a camp or fire. The next day, they continued. They found amulets hanging from branches, bird skulls, woven sticks. These objects were linked to ancient Slavic witchcraft practices, which were illegal at the time. They marked territory. A larger team was assembled. During the search, one ranger nearly fell into a trap, a deep pit with sharpened stakes at the bottom. The man was not just marking territory, he was willing to injure anyone who followed him. The following week, the rangers were issued rifles borrowed from the army and returned in pairs. One pair was attacked. Arrows. They never saw the shooter, but were forced to retreat. One arrow was found embedded in a tree. After that, a unit of 24 militarized police officers entered the forest carrying automatic weapons. A week later, a ranger cabin was set on fire during the night. Someone threw a bottle filled with fire. The 2 rangers inside escaped, but the building burned completely. The man was no longer hiding, he was hunting. The militia returned with twice as many men. At midday, an officer was struck in the shoulder by an arrow. The others opened fire into the forest. They found blood trails and followed them with dogs. They discovered a crude shelter, pine branches covering a hole dug into the ground. There was blood, but the man was gone. There were no more attacks. They assumed he had died from his wounds or fled the area. Years later, the Soviet Union collapsed. Rangers began leaving the park. One colleague who stayed behind found another amulet. It looked new. The man had never left. That sector of the park was never patrolled the same way again. The next case took place in another country, decades later. In Romania, illegal logging is a serious problem. Gangs cut down hundreds of trees per night and haul entire loads away by truck. Many forest rangers accept bribes. Those who refuse are threatened with axes, chainsaws, and sometimes guns. For years, rangers tried to stop the loggers. They hid in the forest at night with flashlights and notebooks. If the group was small, they pretended to be more numerous to scare them off. If the group was large, they simply took notes and called the police. But the police always arrived too late. Local authorities blamed the rangers for the missing timber, claiming they were all corrupt. They began deducting the losses from everyone's wages every week until the problem was resolved. The rangers were furious, but they could not quit. They had families to support. They had to stop the loggers somehow. They tried fireworks to scare them off. It didn't work. They tried using dogs. The loggers realized the rangers would never release them. The rangers asked the government for weapons. They were repeatedly denied. They were told they were neither soldiers nor police. 2 rangers, Niku and Gavil, achieved a small victory. They found a large group cutting trees. Niku distracted the loggers by shouting and walking toward them with his flashlight on. Meanwhile, Gavil punctured 3 of the 4 tires of the truck. The next day, they found the truck abandoned. It was a major victory. They sold the timber and planted new trees. 3 weeks later, a ranger named Pavel was patrolling alone in an area they believed to be safe. He radioed in, reporting 2 logging trucks. He requested backup. Other rangers rushed to help. Pavel said the trucks were almost loaded and preparing to leave. They told him not to act alone. He stopped responding. When they arrived, the loggers were gone. So was Pavel. They searched all night. In the morning, one ranger screamed. Pavel was found 100 meters from where the search had begun. He had been cut and sawed into pieces. It was the worst crime any of them had ever seen. Pavel's funeral was devastating. After that, the government finally allowed rangers to carry rifles. Since then, the loggers moved to other areas. Pavel should never have died, but his death changed the rules. A bronze plaque with his name was placed at headquarters. New rangers pass it every day. In another country, the mystery did not involve direct violence. A forest ranger in the United States received a report of possible illegal hunting in a specific area. He grabbed a portable metal detector and went to investigate. Rangers do this routinely. Bullets embedded in trees can indicate where illegal hunters operate. After walking about 800 meters, he saw clear shotgun damage on a tree, one of the most obvious examples he had ever encountered. But when he passed the detector over the area, there was no signal. That was strange. Even the most careful hunters rarely bothered digging bullets out of trees. He pulled out a small knife and began removing the bark. There were visible tunnels in the trunk, typical of ballistic impact. But at the end of one tunnel, there was no metal. There was something white, almost porcelain-like. He scraped away the surrounding wood and removed the object. When he looked closely, he nearly dropped it. It was a tooth. A human tooth. He radioed for backup and secured the area with crime scene tape. Within hours, another ranger arrived. Days later, a full team of forensic technicians, photographers, and specialists examined the site. They documented everything before carefully removing the remaining teeth from the tree using special tools to preserve DNA. Investigators asked whether there had been any unusual activity in the area. The rangers said no. The teeth were compared against dental records of missing persons. No matches. DNA testing also produced no results. Whoever the man was, he had no relatives in the system, alive or dead. One early theory was that it could have been an ancient Native American burial site with the tree growing around remains. Tests ruled that out. Another theory was that someone had been shot in the face at close range, but there were no metal fragments mixed with the teeth. The most disturbing theory was that someone had loaded a shotgun shell with human teeth and fired it into the tree. There was no other explanation. But why? And whose teeth were they? The lab reached one conclusion. The teeth had been embedded in the trunk for no more than a year. They belonged to a man in his 40s. The ranger had been working in that area during that time. The forest was large, the team was small, but it was difficult to accept that something like this had happened so close by. They never identified the owner of the teeth. They never confirmed whether it was a murder. No one knew how or why it happened. To this day, no one knows. The case remains officially closed, but no ranger has returned to that area alone. The final case involves something completely different. A forest ranger named Ron was conducting a routine fire management inspection when he suddenly stopped responding to radio calls. Another ranger went to his last known location and found Ron's truck abandoned. The radio was sitting on the passenger seat. A search was organized. Tracking dogs were brought in. They led the team directly to Ron. He was cold and appeared to be suffering from a severe allergic reaction. His face and neck were swollen, as were his arms and hands. His skin was deep pink, tight and shiny. Around his fingertips, the skin was almost black. A medic cleared his airway and started an IV. Ron was airlifted to a hospital. No one knew what had happened. The doctors appeared panicked. One of them said Ron's chances of survival were low. His coworkers were devastated. They thought about his wife and children. 3 days later, Ron stabilized. He would likely survive. Some rangers visited him. They were relieved, but they wanted answers. Ron said he remembered walking through the forest when he noticed a black volcanic stone on the ground. It looked out of place. He picked it up. At first, it felt light and normal. Then it began to heat up in his hands. He dropped the stone and looked at it on the ground. After that, his memory became fragmented. He remembered the swelling and being unable to breathe. Then darkness. He woke up in the hospital. The EPA was contacted. They suspected the stone might be radioactive. Ron was tested. It wasn't radiation, but they couldn't determine what it was. Gradually, his condition improved on its own. About 60 hours after admission, he began stabilizing without further intervention. EPA agents returned to the site Ron had described. They searched for hours using precise coordinates, thoroughly combing the area. They found no stone, nothing matching the description. This frightened them. If it was dangerous, someone else could find it. Warning signs were posted throughout the forest. No one has ever reported finding anything like it. Ron recovered, but never returned to the job. He found work in home renovations with his brother. He loved being a ranger. Something had frightened him enough to quit entirely. To this day, no one knows what he touched. The stone was never found. His position was filled, but he never fully explained why he resigned.
Forest rangers spend their lives moving through places almost no one enters. Most of the time, they find nothing but trees, trails, and silence. But these cases show that not everything in the forest reveals itself clearly. Some things leave marks. Others simply vanish. None of these incidents received a definitive explanation. None were officially resolved. And all of them happened in areas that remain open, patrolled, and visited to this day. Which means that at some point, someone may walk through the exact same place, never knowing how close they came to something that was never meant to be found.